All right, well, welcome everyone to Reducing Occupant Exposure to EMFs in Residential Construction, Part 3. This is Assessing and Mitigating AC Electrical Field EMFs. This is an ongoing series of our Reducing Occupant Exposure session. This session is approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, GBCI, AIA-HSW, AIBD, NARI Green, Certified Green Professional for the HBA, and may be applicable to your local or state-based design or architecture contractor license. Presenter, but just the host and moderator today, actually. My name is Brett Little, and I am the executive director here at the Green Home Institute. Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. We also oversee the certification of LEED for Homes, Green Star, and Enterprise Green Community. Big thanks to our Platinum Plus sponsor, Anderson Windows and Doors. Check them out for all your fenestration needs on new or existing homes. You support Green Homes, you can become a member today if you support our mission, support our mission, and also get some other benefits for that as well. Become a certified green professional and set yourself apart. Check that out on our website as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our presenter, Orem. Orem is a certified biology environmental consultant and electromagnetic radiation specialist that provides on-site home and office evaluation services to residents and businesses in Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego areas of California. He received his certification as a building biology environmental consultant and electromagnetic radiation specialist from the International Institute for BAU Biology, I believe, and Ecology. Orem's training includes assessment and mitigation of unhealthy electric and magnetic field exposure, indoor air quality, mold, and chemical outgassing. Orem consults on the design, building, and remodeling of healthy homes and offices in Southern California and throughout the country, and also has been key to implementing EMF reduction strategies into the Green Star certification program, one of the first and nearly almost only green certification programs that gives guidance on reducing electromagnetic frequencies. So with that, I will hand it over to Orem Miller. Please put your questions in the chat box if you have them, and thanks for joining.
Hello, everyone. This is Orem Miller in Los Angeles, California. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on, as Brett said, part 3 of our ongoing webinar series that he invited us to put together last summer. In fact, I'll show you in one of the slides here how we came to know Brett and how he came to know us. So let me proceed further, and I will explain that. So this is part 3, assessing and mitigating AC electric fields, EMFs, in residential construction, remodeling projects, existing homes. And I am a certified building biology environmental consultant and electromagnetic radiation specialist located in California. And here is my website, www.createhealthyhomes.com. So the source of the knowledge or information that you're hearing on these webinars for this series for the Green Home Institute comes from the building biology profession. And what we focus on is the relationship between homes and commercial spaces and human health. The profession was founded in Germany in the in the 1970s, brought to this country 27 or 8 years ago by architect Helmut Zia, who passed away 3 years ago. But we're continuing on quite strong and in his honor, and he really was our inspiration because he just a tremendous guiding light and force for bringing this knowledge to North America. And he founded the International Institute for Building Biology and Ecology, the IBE, in Clearwater, Florida, 27 or 8 years ago. And I am one of over 120 certified building biology environmental consultants and now electromagnetic radiation specialists in the USA and Canada. Now there are seminars on this knowledge. So And that is to introduce you, the viewers and listeners to this series, to EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and to the building biology profession, to identify sources of EMFs in homes and offices, and to help you understand how EMFs are produced by the standard design and wiring practices in use today and in the last many decades, and particularly to inform you about the health risks from EMFs, because we don't hear about that in this country. They know about it in Europe and the rest of the world, but not here. You're going to hear a lot more about that from Damon when he goes into the radio frequency EMFs the next time. That's really quite an interesting story, and you're going to be quite surprised at what we don't know as a population in this country that the rest of the world does. And then the official stance of government regulatory agencies and industry is quite different than it is for us in the so-called EMF safety community worldwide and nationally. So you'll see some of that in my presentation and in future presentations, and I think Spark alluded to it as well. And then we also want to inform you of how EMFs are handled and discussed outside the United States. They take them quite seriously, and there are standards, for instance, for magnetic field exposure in other countries. We have none in the United States for that particular type of EMF. And then the ultimate goal is to reduce occupant exposure to these EMFs in residential and commercial construction. So we are now in the third of the 7 webinars that you see on this list. Today is the AC electric field EMFs. They are different than magnetic fields, as you will see in just a moment. Then the next one after today, whenever that gets scheduled, sometime in the summer, will be radio frequency EMFs, followed, hosted by Damon Coyne. And then dirty electricity EMFs will be presented by Frank DiCristina. And then we'll have a summary wrap-up webinar to answer questions and go into any other details that we didn't cover in the preceding 6. So let's start now. So again, this is the general, these are the general goals of our profession. When we go to a client's home, whether they're symptomatic or not, our goal is to find and reduce sources of toxicity in the home or office. And that includes indoor air quality, electromagnetic fields, outgassing of building materials. We want to strengthen the client's tolerance to these influences outside the home, because many of the people we work with, as you'll see in a moment, are in fact sensitive to mold, chemical outgassing, and electrical fields, electromagnetic fields. So the term for those who are chemically sensitive is MCS, multiple chemical sensitivity. And these people really appreciate the fact that I even know what those letters mean, because then they realize, oh, you understand what I'm going through. And I say, yes, absolutely. Not personally, but the clients I work with have this, and the majority of them, so I know full well, and that's my training as a building biologist. And then the term for electrical hypersensitivity, EHS, stands for that, electrical hypersensitivity or electrical hypersensitivity syndrome, or EI, environmental illness, is sort of an umbrella term for all of it. So we accomplish this improvement that we provide for our clients by reducing, to help them reduce their sensitivity to these fields and mold and such outside of the home, because they can control their home environment in most cases, but they can't control the environment they go into when they go to a coffee shop or a library or a friend's home that has Wi-Fi. These people that we work with are quite sensitive to this, and it triggers a whole host of symptoms that Damon will go over next time. So we accomplish this by reducing exposure to the household toxins in their own home and creating as low of an EMF environment, EMF-free or EMF-reduced sleeping environment in particular, as possible. So this is an image that you'll see again in a few minutes that shows how these fields are invisible and come through the air and affect us, particularly when we're sleeping. So these are the building related continuation of this theme, and I wanted to give you some perspective on this. So for all of us who are practicing building biologists around the world, I would say that what you see here is probably accurate for most of my colleagues. At least this is my experience as a practitioner. 60 to 70% of my clients are already electrically hypersensitive. And remember, all I do is work on EMFs, and I'm quite busy. I have worked for 6 years in Los Angeles, and 5.5 of them without advertising. just word of mouth and through my website. And I'm quite busy and actually have a waiting list, and there are other colleagues here. It's just because there are people who are interested in this and they find out about us through our websites, and so there's quite a need for this work, and there are many people who have these symptoms from these technologies, from these fields, and people don't know about it. So there's a lot of work to be done. So I would say that of the 60-70% of my clients who know that they are electrically hypersensitive, and I'll go over the symptoms in a moment, 2/3 of those people are symptomatic. So 70% are sensitive. They can feel the presence of these fields, and 2/3 of them actually have symptoms, which I will review in a minute. So 30 to 40% of the overall group are neither sensitive nor symptomatic, but they are health conscious. So that's the breakdown of my practice. And you always have an interaction between the sources of EMFs and other factors that could be influencing their symptoms. Diet, heredity, stress levels, whether they're getting healing modalities or not. And I tell my clients, I can't guarantee an outcome for you specifically relative to the symptoms you tell me you have. But what I can say to my clients is, to the degree that they are related to the EMFs that we measure, and if I do measure elevated fields of one kind or another, and usually there are multiple fields in every home in certain areas, and to the degree that we're able to reduce those fields, the degree to which we're successful doing that, and the degree to which their symptoms are caused by these fields, that's the degree to which they can expect relief. And sometimes it comes quickly, sometimes it takes a while, but that is what I can say to people. And oftentimes we don't know till we do the reduction, and then they say, yes, I feel better. Sometimes not. But at least we've helped their body to be more healthy and to respond to other approaches that finally do help them, like maybe there's mold in the house or something like that. Or there's something organic going on from a purely medical standpoint. And once that's addressed, then getting rid of these fields in the sleeping and living environment helps them to stay healthier and get healthier faster with these other modalities. I think you understand what I'm saying here. Now, among the general public, to put this in perspective, these 70% of my clients are 3 to 5% of the general population. So it is estimated, particularly from researchers in Europe who researched this, that roughly 3 to 5% of a nation's population is electrically sensitive. Now, that's a lot of people when you put it together. But then they also say, the researchers outside the United States who do the research on this work, that up to 1/3 of any given population is estimated to be symptomatic from chronic use, particularly of wireless devices used to close proximity, which again, Damon will discuss in the next webinar. Everyone has cellular damage from RF exposure. So these slides that I'm showing here are not just unique to electric field. This is part of, I took these slides from my general EMF presentations or PowerPoints, which you can find on my website under createhealthyhomes.com. Then click on EMF slides, EMF lectures and slides, something like that. And you'll see links to PDF versions of my entire PowerPoint presentation, so you can get a sneak preview of the RF stuff. And go to Damon's website as well, intentionalenvironments.com, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Damon, later in the Q&A. So 2/3 of the population appear to be able to repair cellular damage from exposure to EMFs, not just Wi-Fi and cell phones, but all EMFs at night. Now, I'm going to be talking particularly about the one EMF that you do have in your nighttime sleeping environment in this webinar, which is the electric field. And these people don't become symptomatic. It's just like cigarette smokers from 50, 60 years ago. I would say, well, the doctors say that the majority of the population of chain smokers did develop emphysema, and a certain minority developed lung cancer. But there was a percentage who didn't develop either of those, and that's where we're at today. It's estimated again that 2/3 of the population who use wireless devices and who are exposed to EMFs don't develop symptoms because they can correct the damage that does occur on a cellular level. So which is why we want to create as clean and healthy an environment, particularly for sleeping at night, as possible, because that's when the repair occurs. So your risk ratio for disease, if you're someone who doesn't have symptoms to begin with and is not sensitive, if you're just part of the general population, we'd say your risk ratio is 1 out of 3. Chances for developing symptoms or some illness at some point in your life from the use of wireless devices and from other EMFs. Now, there are 4 types of EMFs. This is a review for those of us who have been on the webinars already. The first is, and in no particular order to this, AC electric fields from house wiring and power lines, which I'm covering today at 60 hertz. The second is magnetic fields from house wiring and power lines at 60 hertz. They are separate from each other, as you'll see in just a moment. And then the third type of EMF that we look at for and evaluate and mitigate in homes is all the radio frequency transmitters that we're loading up in our homes, from thermostats to speaker systems to routers, you know, the boxes, you know, the Roku and Apple TV that for streaming Netflix and such, not to mention the tablets and just everything. And we're in the era of the Internet of Things. Again, Damon will cover this, but it's just, you know, that's really the growth area in terms of exposure to that particular type of EMF and the growing symptoms that people have. And then finally, dirty electricity, which has been with us really for decades, which Frank will discuss in his webinar, and that tends to be 2,000 to 100,000 hertz. Radio frequency is roughly at 800, 900, 1800, 1900 megahertz. The frequencies that the FCC has given to the cell companies, 2400 megahertz or 2.4 gigahertz for Wi-Fi and 5.8 gigahertz as well. Now, I do want to explain to you, in terms of today's discussion, that electric and magnetic fields are different from one another in the following way. So AC electromagnetic fields are created by the alternation of polarity of AC electricity on electric power lines, the circuits in your walls, and power cords that you plug in at 60 times per second. So if you look at this sine wave down here, and you can't see my pointer, but you see that just follow the red line. It's a sine wave. And let's say that the horizontal line with the arrow at the right is the 0 crossing point. And then at the peak, at the top, you're at 60 volts. So let's say that the y-axis is voltage in terms of pressure, electrical pressure or voltage. So we have 60 volts at the top, and then back to 0, and then to 60 volts again. It increases as you go below the 0 crossing point, but now you're negative in polarity. So then you come up to 0, go into the positive field, or positive dimension and polarity on the third half circle, and then the fourth again is negative. So here we have depicted 2 cycles, and it's 120 volts peak to peak, from the top peak to the trough, or the peak going down. And in Europe, it's twice as high and twice as low because it's 240 volts there, and gets stretched out a little bit if the x-axis is time, because they have 50 cycles per second, we have 60. Now, we have fields emitted into the air when you have electricity in a transformer or a motor or in a line, a linear source, a wire, and you have a hot wire and a neutral wire. And we'll discuss that. But the M in the EMF is the magnetic field component. The E in the EMF is the electric field component. And you see here that they're at right angles to each other. These fields emit off power lines, circuits, and power cords at right angles to each other. They enter our living space and can affect our health. They are not coupled at 60 hertz. That's what this next slide shows. So electric and magnetic fields are coupled in the far field, and the far field is defined generally as 3 or more wavelengths from the source. Now, within the near field, electric and magnetic fields are uncoupled. You can see how chaotic they are from the source, which happens to be a radar dish here, to that vertical line. That's the near field. And it has 2 parts within it, but that's not important or relevant to us. But they don't coalesce into the distinct field that you see on the right side, which is in the far field, where the electric and magnetic field components are coupled. So if one goes up, the other goes up. If you measure one, you can calculate the other. So we don't regard them as independent of each other. But that's in the far field, and that applies when we measure radio frequencies, because you're in the far field in, depends on the wavelength, and Damon will discuss that. But for our purposes, for AC electricity on power lines and in circuits, the wavelength at 60 hertz is not feet. It's not within the house. It's 3,000 miles for one wave. And so 3 times that is 9,000 miles, the circumference of the Earth, or out into space. So clearly we're never in the far field when it comes to 60 hertz AC electricity. We're always in the near field. So EMFs from house wiring must be measured separately. You have a separate field that's from the electric field portion and a separate magnetic field portion, and they both affect your health. And if you don't have the right meters and only have a Gauss meter measuring magnetic fields, you're going to miss the electric fields. That's my point. Because you can have an electric field without a magnetic field and vice versa. Electric fields are often missed. I call them the unknown EMF, and yet they're the most common. So I won't take a lot of time with this slide, but basically, and that 10 should be a 1 on the very left, and then 10 next to it, 10 to the first, then 10 to the second, 10 to the third, and 10 to the fourth. So the ELF band is extra low frequencies, and 60 hertz is in that dark green portion on the very left. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So moving on here, so in general, electric and magnetic field exposure for all of these 4 types of EMFs, considered by industry and the FCC to be relatively harmless, but they are a potentially significant health risk to everyone, like cigarettes were in the 50s and 60s. Most of the research comes from Europe and outside the United States. And these countries, and this is not the most complete list, are limiting Wi-Fi and alerting their citizens to dangers of radio frequencies. I talk about this in my general lectures, and Damon will go over it, but did you know that in France, in January of 2015, just over a year ago, they voted, the legislature for the nation of France voted to ban Wi-Fi in all daycare centers and nurseries for children under 3. And if you're a grade school teacher, you have to turn the Wi-Fi router off. You can't leave it on standby when it's not in use in the classroom, because they know that it affects people. Again, Damon will go over that. But so the U.S. is promoting Wi-Fi for everything. EMFs do interfere with healing and treatment from healthcare practitioners, and most people improve. This is what keeps us going and what makes us such a satisfying profession, because most people who we work with who are symptomatic, they find relief, the vast majority of them, from the work that we do. They just need help identifying and reducing the fields. Now, there's a great deal of credible scientific research. The International Commission for Electromagnetic Safety in Italy, based there, but it has 24 people from around the world who are trying to point out and make known to battle the industry stance that there is no evidence of harm. There's a lot of evidence, a lot of research. It's not done here, but it does exist, and these organizations are putting this together and making it available for people to know about. The Swedish Association for Electrosensitive, Power Watch in England, International EMF Alliance, and then this effort. This is really quite striking. This gentleman here is Martin Blank. He's a PhD professor at Columbia, who did work on DNA, and he said, as we were having lunch after he gave a lecture here in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and I know him because he spoke at our conference in Washington, D.C. A few years ago. He said, I was a skeptic until I did the research on DNA at Columbia University, and now I'm not a skeptic anymore. He's retired, and he lives in Canada, in Vancouver. So he can talk about this without repercussions. And he really is coming out and saying there's a great deal of harm with this, particularly for wireless. And again, I'm getting into Damon's area, but he put together an initiative with over 200 colleagues, 200 scientists from around the world who have done the original research, issuing an appeal to the UN and World Health Organization in May of last year, urging them to take action on health effects for the sake of their citizens from 39 countries. Nothing has been done with their appeal, but at least it's on record. And if you want to see a compendium of research, go to emfscientist.org. And this is a list that I put together of links to articles and compendia of links to research on magnetic fields and also electric fields to a lesser extent, but particularly magnetic fields. So this is research on the health effects of human exposure to magnetic and electric fields, primarily conducted outside the United States because there's no support for research in the U.S. Industry tries to suppress evidence of harm. That's a bold statement to make, but it is the conclusion of everyone in the EMF safety community around the world. That is what happens. So there are links to abundant research through the following websites, and they're here. And again, I will put this PowerPoint, and this slide is on the other PowerPoints you can link to from my website, on the EMF lecture slides page when we're done. And it will be part of, you can always come back and see this, the archive of this webinar through the Green Home Institute website. And we have Safe Living Technologies in Canada, Rob Metzinger's website. He and Larry Gust, who's here in Ventura, California, are the two main teachers of the EMF seminars. I have some links on my own website. Lloyd Burrell is an electrically sensitive person in England, and then you're familiar with the other links there. I've mentioned them before. And here's another one, Bioinitiative Report. This is from Cindy Sage here in Santa Barbara, California, and Professor David Carpenter at the University of Albany in upstate New York, bioinitiative.org. And this is what they found. But this is more for radio frequencies, so I'm going to leave this for Damon to cover next time. So let's get into electric fields. With that introduction, magnetic fields, this is from Spark, Burmaster. He put this together. On the left, you see that magnetic fields are the energization of the space around electric current flow. You're all familiar with this from high school and college physics. You have these diminishing circles with diminishing intensity in any given direction around a wire. This is a linear load. And the magnetic field in the air around that source is produced by electric current flow through each of those wires. So you see my analogy there of the water coming out of a garden hose. But that water is only there, the electricity is only there, the magnetic field is only there because of the pressure of voltage or the pressure of the water. So the electric fields are the energization of the space between voltage differences. And so voltage is the pressure of electricity. And when that's gone, then you have no flow. Just as when you turn off the spigot, you have no pressure in the garden hose. But you can have voltage without pressure. Sorry. You can have voltage without flow. You can have electric fields without magnetic fields. That's the point we need to make here. So I will get into this analogy further, and it's right here. So here are the basics of electric fields. Produced by differences in electric voltage, as I mentioned, measured with a voltmeter, not a Gauss meter. So you cannot measure electric fields or this type of EMF with a Gauss meter. You can go into a bedroom and you can have a very low magnetic field on the Gauss meter of 0.2, 0.3, 0.5 milligauss and assume that you're completely safe, and you are from that quite harmful type of EMF. We actually consider magnetic fields to be the most carcinogenic, most harmful EMF of the four. But electric fields are the most common, and they really interfere with sleep. Magnetic fields wear you down. They have a grinding influence on the immune system, and they affect your vitality and the strength of your immune system. They are carcinogenic. Electric fields are different. They are carcinogenic, but they wear you out. They don't wear you down quite so much. They rob you of a good night's sleep. You can handle electric fields better than you can handle magnetic fields. But when you get rid of both, you have an exceptionally healthy sleeping environment, and it really affects the quality of your life when you're awake. So electric fields are similar to pressure in the water hose. When you turn the spigot on and you put 80 pounds of pressure up to this nozzle in the picture here, but there's no flow yet because you haven't squeezed the nozzle. They are the unknown EMF because they're prevalent, and most people experience them and are made ill by them and improve when we remove them at night by shutting off breakers if they have Romex in the walls. We'll get into that. But they're missed when you don't use anything but a Gauss meter. And they are independent of AC magnetic fields. Now, this is a picture of Romex. So I have clients who say, well, I moved my bed away from the outlet, so I'm therefore safe from the EMFs. And they don't realize that the electric field comes from the Romex going from outlet to outlet, as you can see here, through the studs about 18 inches off the floor around the perimeter of the bedroom. So they are present AC electric fields are present even if the current is not flowing. That is, if you turn the lamp off. The voltage is still there, up to the switch, wherever that is on the lamp. And the field, the electric field, extends 6 to 8 feet from any plastic jacketed Romex wiring in the walls, as you see in the upper picture. And they also extend 6 to 8 feet into the room from unshielded AC power cords that you plug in. And the field strength does decrease with distance, but the mitigation is not to pull your bed into the middle of the room. We have to turn the circuits off. The fields are present even when these devices are turned off but left plugged in. But the solution is not to unplug the cords, because that only reduces half of the electric field strength. You still have electric fields coming from the Romex, unless you're fortunate enough to have metal clad wiring in the wall, and we'll get to that. So electric field EMFs affect people primarily while they're sleeping, and there are a few situations in the daytime where they affect people as well, which we will get into. These two things you want to avoid. Large electric field exposure comes from electric blankets, electric heating pads, waterbed heaters, and beds that are electrified. I should add that to this slide. The sleep number bed, which is a great invention, but I tell people plug it into a power strip and flip that thing off. Or if they have Romex in the walls, they're going to be flipping off the breaker anyway, and 90% of my clients do that. And you'll see a little later a slide which comes from my website. A page there has numerous, dozens of accounts from people who say, I sleep better now that I'm turning off the breakers or the switch that the electrician put in to make it more permanent and more convenient from the bedroom, when I flip off the power at night to my bedroom and to the circuits that go through the bedroom that they don't know about, that I identify on the tests that I do. So that's our objective. So the fields are present even when these devices are turned off but plugged in. So you don't want an electrified or motorized bed. I've seen a very strong magnetic field coming up through the mattress because of a transformer right under the mattress of an electrified bed because of the motor that lowers and raises the bed. You need to shut that thing off at night and with a power strip. Very essential. So these are some meters. On the left, you have two examples of body voltage meters, and that's what you see in this diagram here. This person laying on the bed is holding a probe, like the little metal handle on the left. This is a kit from SCMF in upstate New York, and it's plugged into a voltmeter, like that yellow meter there, or a Radio Shack meter on the right. And then you have to ground these to a ground of an electric outlet or better to the earth itself, out the window or out the door with a long cord. And then you're referencing your body to earth relative to the presence of fields coming from any plastic wire, whether it's a lamp cord or the Romex in the wall. And we have numbers that we're looking for, which you'll see in just a moment, in millivolts. Now the 2 meters on the right are from Gigahertz Solutions. They are quite accurate, and we're measuring in that case in volts per meter. I don't recommend the electric field setting of the tri-field meter. It's really not sensitive enough, unfortunately. So don't use that meter, the tri-field meter, to measure electric fields in your room, because you will get numbers on either of these meters, the body voltage meter on the left, one of those, or one of the handheld potential free meters on the right, and that are in a level that we consider to be severe anomaly range for the sleeping environment, or extreme even, and the needle on the tri-field meter will hardly tick up. So here is, oh, sorry, this didn't come out quite right in terms of the way it looks, but the version you're going to see on my website is a little cleaner than this. Basically what we have here is field strength potential free in volts per meter on the top row. We want to get our clients out of the severe or extreme anomaly columns, which are the 2 on the right. So that would be, and into the slight or no anomaly columns on the left. So that would be, that dividing line is right in the middle of these columns, splitting the right-hand 2 columns from the left-hand 2 columns. So if you're using a handheld meter, like the Gigahertz Solutions meters, 1.5 volts per meter is your objective, or 100 millivolts or less with the body voltage meter. Now, this is a slide showing the adverse health effects from exposure to AC electric fields in the bedroom. It prevents deep stage 4 sleep, diminishes normal nighttime production of melatonin, and it can cause chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, insomnia, restless leg syndrome, allergies, hyperactivity, depression, headaches. These are all things that people have told me clear up when we're able to identify the proper breakers, and we do that with a protocol that we teach at our seminars. And I actually have it written out by a client of mine from Minnesota on my website on the EMF meters and instruments page under the electric field section. There is a link there for a protocol on how to do the body voltage test, which some of my clients have to do if they live in the part of the country without a building biologist, and I do a consultation by phone, and they have to take their readings and tell me what they found. It's about 10% of my clients. So if you notice here on this graph, from left to right, we have red portions and blue portions. This is time in hours, 8 hours from left to right, and the first red and blue sections about 90 minutes, an hour and a half. That's one cycle of sleep. So you have a non-dreaming, non-rapid eye movement, non-REM portion where you go from stage 1, deeper, stage 2, 3, 4, and back to stage 1 again. And then you have about 20 minutes of dreaming. The amount of time you spend in stage 4 determines how rested and refreshed you feel when you wake up. But electric fields and light, but more electric fields than light, I believe, prevent you from getting into stage 4 and prevent the melatonin from being released from your pineal gland. So you want as much time in stage 4 as possible, and then you wake up feeling more refreshed. So these are some of the improvements that people have reported: deeper levels of stage 4 sleep, increase in normal nighttime, well, they don't report this, but this is what we know happens. Increase in normal nighttime melatonin production, and then these are the things that people tell us: increased vitality, alertness, reduction in muscle pain and joint stiffness, increase in flexibility, range of motion, reduction in fatigue, allergies, depression, even cancer, and greater response to medical therapies. And these are just a few of the comments that I hear from my clients. These are clients of mine here in California, around Los Angeles. These people are sleeping longer, they're not awakening as often, they have more alertness and vitality in the day, including the teenagers. They're not falling asleep in class as much. They feel like they're camping. So it's really gratifying to work with people and hear that kind of feedback. So here's what you do if you have plastic Romex circuits in your walls. These are the mitigation steps to create an electrically clean sleeping environment. If you have plastic jacketed Romex circuits in your walls and the floor, around that room, the electric fields will extend 6 to 8 feet from the circuits in all directions right into the bedroom. So you want to create a zone without the electric fields around, above, below each bed, and determine which circuit breakers to shut off. There's a protocol by following, and here it is, EMF meters and instruments page on my website, createhealthyhomes.com. And then we develop, or we can install, an electrician can install remote shut-off switches and a contactor to press a button in the bedroom. It sends out a radio frequency signal, which even electrically hypersensitive people, for the most part, can tolerate. It's just like a garage door opener. If they can tolerate a garage door opener, they can tolerate this. And then it sends a signal which is picked up by the receiver in the garage or wherever the panel is, which shuts off the contactor. Now, there are contactors made by, what are some of the companies in this country? Square D and Cutler Hammer, that are quite noisy. They have a big thunk when they go on or off, which wakes people up, and they hum in the daytime. I've had complaints about that. So these contactors, up to 4 circuits, by Gigahertz Solutions from Germany, which are UL approved in Canada and the United States, are sold by Safe Living Technologies, and they're really what you want to get, because there's no noise when they go on and off, and they don't hum in the daytime. So I really like that. Now, if you have metal clad wiring, like here, like you see here, this is what we call flex or flexible conduit, or you have the rigid pipe, like in Chicago and New York, and in commercial buildings, you'll have flex or rigid electromechanical tubing or EMT. If that's the case, then you don't have to shut circuits off 98% of the time. So if they contain, if your walls contain this kind of wiring, then there will not be any electric fields in the room from the circuits. You do not need to shut off breakers, but whatever you plug in, that's what causes the electric field. So it's completely under your control within the bedroom. Use plug-in switches like I showed here. A shielded power strip has an on-off switch, or you can rewire the lamps and appliances with shielded AC power cords such as MuCord from Less EMF in upstate New York, lessemf.com. So in summary, you want to avoid electric blankets and electric heating pads, and watch for reverse polarity on a non-polarized plug, because you can put it in the wrong way, and then it's energized all the way through the blanket up to the switch, which is now on the neutral side. I think you understand what I'm saying there. Use battery-operated clocks, laptop AC power cords, and refrigerator AC power cords. Both should be three-pronged, and the refrigerator will be, but this guy is trying to plug a grounded plug into an ungrounded outlet, and so what is he going to use? He's going to use that little cheater plug, and if you don't have, through the screw here of this cover plate, access to a metal box with metal conduit behind it, and you only have 2-wire plastic or cloth-wrapped Romex from the 50s, you're out of luck. You have to ground that outlet to a water pipe in the crawl space or in the basement. That's what we often do in a house that has nothing but 2-wire hot neutral but no ground Romex cloth or plastic wrapped or jacketed Romex from the 50s in a house built in that era, and which hasn't been rewired. That's a deal breaker to me for a new house, and that's a problem for an existing house. We need to provide at least one grounded outlet in every room for use with computers and in the kitchen for the refrigerator, not to mention the fact that you lose your safety from the grounding. You don't have that either. Now, the earthing pad is something that a lot of clients have. The German building biologists don't recommend them because they say if you have the electric fields in the bedroom, they couple under your body and then are bled off onto the ground. And I have to have a conversation with the people at the Earthing Institute about this, because they don't agree with that, but that's what the building biologists in Germany say, and they don't even recommend it. They tell all their practitioners, don't ever recommend it. Well, we take a more a stance where if we reduce the electric fields in the bedroom, which we do anyway, that's our essential goal of our profession before the earthing pad was even invented. We do that with every client because we know the benefits that it provides. To me, sleep is the most important thing. You've got to provide a sleeping environment that doesn't have magnetic fields, electric fields, radio frequencies, or dirty electricity. And then you can put the earthing pad in and get all the benefits that it provides of bringing beneficial negative ions from the earth up into your body, because we're depleted in that with the fact that we don't walk barefoot on the earth anymore. We're insulated from it. So yes, get those electrons, but do it in an environment where you don't have any electric fields in the air to couple onto your body and go down the reverse way into the earth, which is what the Germans are talking about, and I think they're right. So that's the compromise that we use, or it's not a compromise, it's a benefit. You get the benefit of both. You get the electric field levels down, and if you want to add an earthing pad, you should, and then get all the benefits without the side effects. Now, these last two slides here are to show you how you can reduce AC electricity or AC electric field exposure where you work at your desk, whether it's in your office or in your home office. So the first slide here is for non-Mac PCs, Dell, HP and such, because many of those, half of them on the market, will have a two-prong plug like on the top, on the right. That's a two-prong plug coming the line voltage cord from the transformer at 120 volts to the wall or to the surge protector. That's not good, because that computer will have high electric fields on the keyboard unless it's a cordless keyboard, in which case you're not touching the chassis, you're not touching something that's connected with a wire to the chassis of the computer. But there's problems with that, which Damon will get into, and we don't recommend cordless mouse and cordless keyboard setups at computer stations. We want wired and turn off the Bluetooth. He'll get into that. But when it comes to electric fields, you can have an astronomically high electric field when you put your hand like right on a laptop that's ungrounded, and that's true for Macs too, and as you'll see in just a minute, or PCs, even if they're a desktop tower. Whether you have a two-prong plug here, or the power strip ground does not work, or the outlet does not have a working ground. Either it's two-pronged or it's three-pronged, but the ground is not functional, and I've seen all of this. So that's why you need one of those circuit testers, which you can see here, that yellow device, because that tells you whether you have a working ground. And that second light needs not only to be lit, but as bright as the middle light. Because if it's dim, if the ground light is dim, it means that the ground is loose and it's as if it wasn't there. So it's, okay, so why do we do this? Because if your laptop is ungrounded or your desktop is ungrounded, what'll happen is you'll feel tired. It drains your energy, and you wonder why you're so tired after working on the computer for a period of time. And some people do this for a living. I have several clients who are very tired within an hour, and they still have another 7 hours to go working at the computer all day, and it turns out it was an ungrounded cord. So the solution is really the best solution is just purchase a USB ground cord from lessemf.com. It's $9, and you plug it into the USB port, and then you plug it's one wire. It goes to the ground prong of the plug, and there's no wires attached to the hot and the neutral, and you plug that into the outlet or to the surge protector, and you now have grounded the chassis of your computer. But you must make sure that you have a good grounded surge protector and outlet to begin with. And for Macs, they have this unfortunate feature where the transformer on the left, in the upper right corner, you can have either this little adapter here with two blades that swing out, or you can pull that off and then plug in the attachment that you see on the coiled up cord in the middle onto that corner, and then you have a three-prong plug at the end. Now, for reasons that I can't remember why the guy said Apple's going to do this, but Apple is doing away with this two-pronged adapter in future models of their computers. They're going to be hardwiring the cord, a molded cord, right in with the three-prong plug at the end. So they're not doing it for health. They're doing it for other reasons, but that's what they're planning to do with all future models. And I'm delighted to know of this because, Apple says, oh, cords are ugly, they're unsightly, go wireless and get rid of your cords. And so strip down to just this two-prong adapter, and then you plug the transformer into the surge protector or into the wall. Now you're ungrounded, and you've got really high electric fields when you put your hand on the Mac. So in summary, the flow of current produces magnetic fields. The pressure of voltage produces electric field EMFs. EMFs are found at various frequencies. You need different meters and instruments to detect each of them. Different meters for electric fields than for magnetic fields. Both can cause health problems. You want to design your home and office to avoid all of these EMFs in the first place. That's where it starts, in proper design. But we can mitigate existing homes and offices as well. Here are some steps to reduce EMFs, electric field EMFs. Metal-clad circuits in and around bedrooms when you design the home, or at least put a shut-off switch near the wall, near the bed. You can flip off and have all the outlets go dead in and around, and the circuits in and around the bedroom. We put kill switches into new homes and remodel homes when the walls are open. That's one of the things that we do. And then with Romex circuits, you'll have to use remote shutoff, and you turn off the breakers. You can rewire the lamps with shielded cord from Less EMF called MU cord. Move unshielded cords away from you at your computer desk. Use three-prong grounded AC power cords for laptops, or the USB, what is it here? The USB, right there, USB ground cord from Less EMF. And finally, once again, we have our seminars coming up. If you're interested in learning more about this, go to hbelc.org. Stands for Healthy Building Environmental Learning Center, but it's hbelc.org, and then you click on the tab for seminars and also certification. So that's the end of the formal presentation, and Brett, do we have a couple of minutes for questions? Are you there, Brett?
We got plenty of time here for questions. Just put your questions over in the chat box.
Now, a lady has already asked, have you found that patients with chronic illnesses are more susceptible to this? Yes, absolutely. And in fact, as I've alluded to, and I want my colleagues to chime in as well, Frankie, Christina, and Damon Coyne, to any of the questions that come up here. But many of the, the illnesses themselves are either caused by or at least maintained by the presence of the EMFs in their home environment. So that, yes, that definitely happens. What would you suggest on designing around for hospital beds? Well, the problem with hospital beds is they're always electrified. And the problem, you know, I just, in Florida while I was there, speaking to the home inspectors, I went down and visited my elderly parents. And my dad's 88 years old, and he is, and I had this sort of, you know, like see no evil, hear no evil, you know, you put your hands over your eyes and over your ears. It was painful for me to see that he had one of these electrified chairs, but he needs that. He presses a button and the chair lifts right up and helps him stand up and transfer to a wheelchair. So what do? At least he doesn't sleep in a bed that has that, you know, raising and lowering, but eventually he's going to need something like that. But right now, my mom shuts off the circuit that goes to the whole half of the trailer, the mobile home where his bed is. So he sleeps in an electric field and free environment at night. So to answer your question, any bed, whether it's a hospital bed or a motorized bed at home, you ideally want to turn off the circuits in the room, ideally, to get the electric field levels down. And also for the bed, if you have metal clad wiring or you can't turn the circuits off for various reasons for an elderly person, at least have the power strip and get it. You can get a shielded power strip from a couple of people in our profession. A guy named Edwin Sachs, S-A-K-S, here in California will make that for you, custom make it. Contact me at createhealthyhomes.com and I'll put you in touch with him. In any event, you could then you could plug that into the wall and run that shielded cord to a shielded power strip and put that on the bedside table and then plug the motorized bed into that. Then you have an on-off switch within reach. The person can, you know, if they have the ability to do so, roll over and hit that on button and then press the button to raise or lower the bed, and then press the off button, on-off button on the power strip to kill the power so they're not sleeping on a bed that has voltage and even possibly magnetic fields from a transformer. Damon or Frank, do you have any other comments on these last two questions? Damon, you'll have to unmute your phone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Frank, you make shielded power. Good. All right, so give out your website.
Okay.
Oh, type it in.
No. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Well,
yes.
I was just going to comment on the remote control power strip. I think that's a great idea with the bed. One thing they have, they do make remote control power strips. Belkin does. So that'd be one way to have somebody that's in a hospital bed to be able to turn the bed back on with a small remote that sends a little tiny radio frequency burst to turn the bed motor back on. So I think that's might be a good idea.
And Frank, why don't you explain to the listeners what you provide, what you offer?
I do, as Maura mentioned, I'm also a BBEC, Building Biology, Ecology Consultant, and an EMRS, Electromagnetic Radiation Specialist. So I also do healthy home assessments. I specialize, as Orem does, in electric and magnetic field mitigation and RF consulting. I spent the last 40 years in the electronics industry in various applications of industrial electronics, industrial computing, avionics, aircraft, automotive, etc. So I will just relate to a client I actually saw yesterday. I went out to a client's house, and she had a tri-field meter, and she was measuring. Now, granted, we're talking about electric fields, and she has electric field issues, of course, because there's lots of Romex. But her magnetic field readings were 15 milligauss and higher in the house.
Wow.
And the problem was, one of the problems that arose was she had the furnace replaced. And since she's had the furnace replaced, she's just, since I think it was back in November, she just she can't sleep. She's a basket case because it's just she turns the entire house off. And we're in Minnesota here, so fortunately we've had a fairly mild winter, but that's a tough situation to be in. We turned the house off, and we could still measure significant fields. So Sparky alluded to mentioned all this in his presentation. Was I measured about 3.5 amps of current on her water pipes.
Wow.
Which
is there
is
broken neutral in the neighborhood, do you think?
No, it's she's got. I don't think it's her neutral. She's really, really high.
Could be a neighbor's broken neutral or loose neutral, possibly.
True. Well, I don't think I'm going to be going door to door though.
And you don't have to, as long as the neutral is good at her place, you can.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and then she was complaining about when she turned certain lights on, which I will talk about in my seminar. She had these lights that look very much like spot lamps. And when you look very carefully, you'll see a little curlicue inside.
Oh.
Yep. And what was happening was she was feeling the not only the electric fields, but there was the dirty electricity coming through the wiring and the radiated from the compact fluorescents, which I'll talk about in the dirty electricity portion. So I've suggested to get rid of the lights, go back to an incandescent, which you can use eco-smart incandescents. There are different types of incandescents and halogens that can be used to combat dirty electricity that don't emit any RF frequencies of dirty electricity. As far as going back to the bed, some ideas that you can do is they could shield the bed, and there could be some better grounding done.
Yes, grounding. Yes, that's true.
The problem still comes about with the motor. When the motor is operating, there's going to be a high magnetic field. But that'll be only when the motor is operating. But when the bed is plugged in many cases, like Orem said, they're not grounded properly or they're not grounded well.
Or not at all, yeah.
So not at all. So sometimes if you have a hospital bed or well, we use the brand name Sleep Number. There's a few others out there. Sometimes by adding a ground wire to the frame, that can help reduce a lot of these electric fields. And again, you have to know what you're doing. It's best to call in a building biologist to at least assess it, and then somebody with electrical or mechanical capabilities can possibly add a ground to that or do something. I actually had a client where they had was last year a home theater, home entertainment system. Set a big, huge one, and his easy chair, you know, one of them recliner motorized easy chairs. And I actually have pictures of that. I modified his chair and actually found ways to ground the frame, even though he had nylon bushings, which isolated different portions of the frame, you know, for noise and gliding. And I found ways of grounding and shielding his chair to reduce his electric fields from, I think it was 7 volts down to less than half a volt. I actually was probably closer to 1/4 of a volt. And it made a significant difference in his relaxation.
Yeah, what were the improvements in his symptoms, Frank?
Well, he gets very anxious, very irritable, very quickly. He says he feels tingly. He feels like he's plugged in. You know, like I'm plugged into an electric socket all the time.
And he was. I mean, that's the class. It's 7 volts from each.
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah.
So by taking any amount off, and somebody asked about chronically ill, any person that has any kind of health issue, that if you can reduce their electric and magnetic field and RF exposure, they'll typically, most of the time, feel a lot better, even though that you haven't really done much for their condition. And, you know, we could say cancer, fibromyalgia, you know, all the different types of illnesses that are going on. And the funny thing is, years ago, we didn't have this much illness. It just seems to be getting more and more worse as we get more and more connected and plugged in.
Right. Right. So, thank you for those comments, Frank. And Damon, do you have anything? I have a few more points, answers to some of these other questions. But Damon, do you have anything to add to what Frank said?
Yeah. Well, since this is we've gone through the magnetic field and the electric field components of this, I have seen. We had one client that was in bed for 9 months, and they said she had fibromyalgia, got different diagnosis, but she just couldn't even get out of bed. And there was different components like reducing radio frequency, but the biggest thing was the electric and magnetic field exposures, and we see this in the older houses. So I just wanted to make a point about, homes that are built before 1940. If there's the knob and tube wiring, which you didn't mention, but the hot and neutral wires are separated by a good foot with the ceramic insulators through the studs and the joists, that will elevate both magnetic and electric. Magnetic fields, the current and electric fields are usually high because it's ungrounded. And she was in 12,000 millivolts or 12 volts of body voltage all the time. And that was one of the things that made the most significant improvement was just identifying those circuits, turning them off at night. And so I think it's just an important point to be aware of for people that are remodeling homes. A lot of times the second stories of homes are not rewired with the knob and tube because it's harder to get to. And so in those instances, it's really critical to make sure the electric fields are low enough for the exposure. She was able to get up after, within a week, she was walking around and starting to cook meals for her family. Within a couple of weeks, she started riding her bike, and it was amazing the difference that she experienced just reducing the fields at night.
You're a miracle worker, Damon.
Yeah,
I'd like to add to that.
Yeah, please, Frank.
When you find a home like that, because this is not just new homes that we're talking about remodeling. Just because they upgraded the panel does not mean that, like Damon said, when they have an upstairs, a 2-story or 3-story building or add-ons done over the years on an older home, that wiring is typically closed up, meaning the walls are intact and they're not going to be pulled apart. Just because you have a new panel and you may see brand new Romex or metal clad or conduit wiring going out from the panel doesn't mean that it's all correct. It has to be checked with meters. This is not something you can just visually inspect every single time. Right. Sometimes you can't get access. And a lot of times, if the remodeling was done by somebody else who was not a licensed contractor, access panels may have been covered up so that getting to the mitigation points where the junctions are can be very difficult or very costly. And that's all important to be checked with meters, electric field meters, magnetic field meters. RF is not as much because that's a broadcast EMF. But that's something that has to be checked if you're doing a remodeling job, is to make sure that neutral areas, neutral ground areas, etc., are taken care of. And if you do find a knob and tube situation, a lot of times there are ways around it. You may have to be creative in getting that circuit rewired. You may have to go outside the building or in an attic crawl space or underneath a basement crawl space to rewire things.
Yeah, what these gentlemen are saying, what my colleagues are saying, it raises a really important point that I hope everyone can, a really important takeaway, and that you can come away from this webinar appreciating. And we run into this every day with our clients. There are all these buzzwords and all these issues and that are out there on the internet relative to the EMF safety community that we hear about all the time. Smart meters, Wi-Fi, ground earthing pads, dirty electricity. These are the things that people know about, but they don't know in the words of one of our colleagues, I forget who it was, he said, they're missing good old basic fundamental building biology, electric fields and magnetic fields. Because these things, as Frank and Damon just said, and Spark would say the same thing, and he's the one who taught all of us, you cannot ignore these. All homes have magnetic and electric fields in one form or another, and until they're mitigated, you really haven't gotten to one of the most fundamental sources of debilitating energy. When I say energy, I mean human energy, vitality, reducing influences and effects. I have a client, had a client in Minnesota when I practiced there who was actually a healthcare practitioner, a naturopath, I think, and she said that she just hated the house she lived in. She didn't sleep, she and her husband didn't sleep well, and she just felt awful whenever she went into her kitchen. Turns out that there was, as Frank said, a very large amount of current. I don't think it was 3.5 amps, but it was 1 or 2 amps, if I recall, of current on the water pipe, which came in where their bedroom was, and went up the wall, and then ran the grounding conductor that carried all that current, ran under their bed, literally a few feet from the top of the bed, because it was right in the ceiling of the basement, and then it circled around and ran right under the kitchen floor to the breaker panel, which was just beyond the kitchen. So the two places that they spend the most time in the house, the bedroom and the kitchen, were right over the path of this. And when we mitigated that, we made sure that the neutral was good on the electric service drop from the utility, and we were able to mitigate that. Then that went away, because when you put the dielectric union in to the water pipe, it's a complete reduction. It doesn't go part way. It's 100% reduction in that field. And you also make sure the house doesn't have wiring errors. That was all covered last month, and we can discuss it again in the wrap-up seminar that we have at the end of the series. And you can contact any of the 4 of us to talk about it in more detail. But basically, that was just a really important change in their lives, because it gave her vitality. She enjoyed being in her home for the first time, and a lot of other things then went in a positive direction from there. So all right. So magnetic fields in the EMF safety community are known about, but and you can get for free, at least out here. I think that's true for every electric utility in the country. You can get an EMF, a magnetic field survey. They'll come out, and I've seen them, and they get the same numbers I do. But they don't really know how to mitigate that, although they do give a video from Carl O'Reilly on fixing wiring errors here in Southern California, because he made a video for Southern California Edison that you can get from lessemf.com, explaining from one electrician to other electricians how to fix wiring errors. That's Carl O'Reilly with a K. And he has a book that he's written, Tracing EMFs in Building Wiring and Grounding. So that's valuable, but otherwise, and nobody knows about electric fields. What you learned today, and you should come back and review the archive of this webinar, and I'll have the PowerPoint slides on my website under EMF lecture slides. Basically, nobody even knows about that in the EMF safety community. This is the unknown EMF, and yet it's one of the most common, and it robs you of a good night's sleep, and people miss it. And other practitioners who are not building biologists miss it, who are EMF consultants. So we're trying to inform people. We appreciate all of you who are watching and listening to this webinar, learning about this. And let's see, there were a couple of questions here. Somebody was asking how far these go. What about shutting off circuits in adjacent bedrooms? How far do magnetic and electric fields reach? So magnetic fields from house wiring, from wiring errors, or from current on the water pipe, depending on the current load or the unbalanced load of a wiring error, or the current load on the water pipe or grounding conductor, can extend 3, 4 feet, 5 feet into the room. So really the question is, what kind of magnetic fields do we measure? And that varies. Magnetic fields from wiring errors do go away when you turn the lights off. And the magnetic fields from knob and tube wiring also go away when you turn the electric loads off. The electric fields do not, by the way. And as a side note, the reason why you have high electric fields from knob and tube wiring is because that hot wire, which has the voltage, has nothing to bleed that off or to reduce it nearby. So you get the full brunt of that. And as Damon said, you can get 8, 10, 12 volts, or 8, 10, 12,000 millivolts, or 8 to 12 volts per meter with the various electric field meters that we use, the body voltage meter or the handheld meter. Now, when they invented Romex, which was cloth wrapped in the beginning, and brought the neutral next to the hot, there were no grounds yet for another 20 years. But in the 40s, when they invented Romex and brought that neutral, Spark taught us that that neutral bleeds off some of the voltage from the hot. And therefore, you come out of the stratosphere and you do reduce the electric field somewhat. But when they added a ground 20 years later in the plastic Romex of the 1960s, that ground further bleeds off some of that voltage. And that's where you get to the voltage levels, the electric field levels of maybe 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 millivolts today from Romex, as opposed to the 8, 10, 12,000 millivolts that you get at the same distance from the wall, 2 feet, let's say, with knob and tube wiring. So again, all right, so to answer your question, Mark, what we do is we give the client a meter in their hand. I mean, with the body voltage meter, there are many ways of doing this. You can put out a piece of conductive plastic or cloth and connect that and have the client read that and give you the numbers over the walkie-talkie. The client can pretend that they're sleeping and have the walkie-talkie in one hand and the meter in the other. And I'm in the basement or outside, wherever the breaker panel happens to be, and I turn all the breakers off. We get the initial number, and then we turn all the breakers off. And I ask them, what's the number now? And now it's really low, and that's that's where we're going. That's our goal, is to get to that level. Hopefully it's below 100 millivolts. Then I turn on the breakers one at a time, and I ask the client over the walkie-talkie, what is the number now? And as we go through the breakers, no change, no change. And then the fourth breaker down, now it's up to 1,500 millivolts. I make a note of that, and I shut it off, and I keep going. And maybe another one will be 800 millivolts, and another one will be 600 millivolts. So those 3 breakers have to be shut off. But here's the thing. The first breaker is the one to the bedroom circuits, but the other 2 go under the floor or in the wall to another room down the hall, and you don't even know about that until you do the test. So that's why people who shut off the breaker for the circuit that goes to the outlets in their bedroom may not be reducing their electric field exposure at night sufficiently. That's why you need to do this test. So we don't care about the adjacent bedrooms. We care about the reading, the electric field exposure level in the area where we're testing. Now, if the person moves the bed to the other side of the room, we have to retest. And another bedroom will have a different formula. Sometimes it's the same formula if the one circuit goes to both bedrooms and there's no other circuits in the walls, and they're in a wing of a one-story ranch house, you know. So every house is different, and we teach our client, we teach our students, and if I work with someone long distance who doesn't have a building biologist, as I mentioned, they have to take the readings, and I teach them how to do it. And then we can mitigate from there. So once we know which circuits are involved, Mark, then we will say to the client, I'm putting colored dots on the breakers. You try it for a week or 2, and if you feel better, and if your kids feel better, and you think they have more calm energy instead of frenetic energy, you know what I'm talking about there, and you like how you feel, then you're willing to invest the several $100s it costs to have an electrician put in one of these remote shut-off strategies that we talked about. Any other questions? Let's see. Are any comments from Frank or Damon?
Well, hey guys, this is Brett here, Green Home Institute. We're actually pretty far over time, so I think we're going to wrap this session up for today. But thanks everyone for all your questions, comments, and dialogue. For those of you listening online, I sent out the survey and the certificate there. For those of you listening on demand, make sure to take the 10-question quiz here at the end to pick up your CEUs. And don't forget to catch the next session, which we're going to be focusing, we're going to be working with Damon Coyne leading that session. And I believe we're going to be covering, what are we covering, Damon?
The radio frequency / microwave radiation from all the wireless stuff. Yeah.
Great. And then after that will be the dirty electricity EMF presentation by Frank DiCristina, who you heard today.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so if you guys have any other questions, there's Orm Miller's contact information there. Orm, where can anyone send you, or can they find your email address on that website as well?
Yes, I should have put that on here, but yes, absolutely. At the bottom of the homepage of my website it's info@createhealthyhomes.com. And if you have questions for the other gentlemen, I can refer them. Actually, Frank put his website in here. It's www.gratefuldousing, all one word, .com. He's in Bloomington, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis. Damon Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E, is in St. Paul, Minnesota. And your website, Damon, is?
Intentionalenvironment.com. No S on environment. Like that.
So you have the website for all three of us now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much to everyone for attending.
Yeah, thank you, Orm. Thank everyone. Have a good rest of your week. Take care.
You're welcome, Brett.